So if that intro song doesn't make you want to do something epic, you're on the wrong channel. Let's get to work on Project Ethel. Oh, fingerprint smudges everywhere. Mo better. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is Dickie's Garage, and today we're going to be working on a very special car, Project Ethel. Now, for those of you that don't know, Ethel is our 1975 Chevy Vega rear engine wheelie car. We picked this car up a while back right after we destroyed our big block Miata in the burnout competition. Now, Project Ethel is not my original build. Somebody built this car back in the 80s, and then through a series of events, it got left for dead. So this is actually a rescue mission to bring this car back to life with my own spin on things. Today I'm going to focus on how the driveline is put together, show you all the adapters and tricks that they use to make it all work, and hopefully get the final assembly done where this engine and transmission's ready to install in the car. So the first thing I want to show you guys is our engine. This is not our original engine that we had planned for this car. We're going to come back around to those plans. This is just the one we're going to use to get this project off the ground. It is a 350 Chevy, pretty well stocked, not a whole lot going on with the exception of this oil pan. This thing has a piece of exhaust pipe welded into it so that the axle can cross over to the other side of the engine. I'll show you how that works shortly. So the other big piece of this equation is the transmission, which one could arguably say is what makes this all possible. This transmission is an Oldsmobile Toronado transmission. It's called a TH425. This is a front-wheel drive V8 transmission from, I believe, somewhere in the late 60s. So, problem being, this is from an Oldsmobile. And some of you guys may know Oldsmobile and Chevy didn't have the same bolt pattern. Fortunately for us, we've got all the original adapters fabricated by that original builder. So let's start in the back where the engine mounts to the transmission. So to make things work, he built this plate to put on the back of the engine to compensate for those misaligned bolt holes. Seems simple enough, right? Well, let's check out these engine mounts. So on a typical small block Chevy, the engine has a mount on either side that goes to the frame. On this application, the engine is too close to the transmission, so the builder had to be a little more creative. What he did is he built this heavy steel mount that uses some factory bosses in the front of the small block Chevy and mounts just underneath that front timing cover. So while we're on the subject of transmission to engine clearance, let's talk about this oil filter. Traditionally, there is a screw-on oil filter that goes right here. Unfortunately, the transmission goes right there. So there's absolutely no room. So what I did, it actually took me a couple of weeks of trial and error to come up with this adapter. This is a Moroso filter bypass adapter. This doesn't actually screw on like a traditional screw-on adapter for like an oil cooler. This actually removes the oil filter adapter from the block and bolts in with 2 bolts. And it is just shallow enough to give me the room I need. And that brings me to these. These are some braided stainless lines I put together to get the oil from here out to my heat exchanger and my remote mount oil filter. Now these lines have to go on at this point in the process. Once the engine and transmission are mated together, there's nowhere to get these in there. In fact, there's barely room to get the lines out of the hole. Switching gears back to mounting, I want to show you guys what holds the back of the transmission in the car. I've got this large steel bracket that bolts directly to the transmission case that hangs over on the frame of the car. Now, I'm not going to put this part on yet because it is nothing but in my way until I raise the engine up in the hole. So I'm just about ready to put the engine and transmission together, but I've got one more part to install. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm not real happy with this part. It's not so much because the part is the cheapest one I could find on eBay, it's because it's not a clutch. Yeah, I'm talking about the torque converter. I'm a firm believer in the 3-pedal system, but in this case there is no stick shift transmission that could fit in this situation, so we're working with what we got. Now this converter is, I think it's made by Assault Racing. It's a 3800 stall, it's kind of loose, which I think will help me, but it's not the most high-end torque converter. It's only about $2 so you really can't go wrong. So we've got the transmission prepped and ready. It's on its little homemade skate so we can move it around. We've got the engine here all prepped and ready as well. Looks like it's time to put on some 80s retro music and put this camera on time lapse. So I've got the engine and transmission loosely fitted together. Before I can cinch it down, I do have to address one more thing. This large cast iron section of the transmission is the differential. It has yet another custom bracket that mates it to the engine. It actually bolts on where the factory engine mount would have went. So it kind of secures this whole assembly together, so there's not much flexing or twisting when you get on the throttle. And finally, those last two bolts on top that secure our small block Chevy to our Oldsmobile adapter plate. So now that I've got the engine and transmission bolted together, the next step is to put the torque converter bolts in. That's about as much fun as going to the dentist, so I'm going to catch up with you guys when it comes time to put that axle through that pan. With that out of the way, it is time to put an axle in. Now, this is the passenger side axle, goes on the right side of the car, and it is the one that goes through that oil pan. This is the one that's making everything so difficult for me, but I think I'm ready for it. Now, as you can see here on top, we do have a custom bracket made by that original builder. This bracket actually bolts on where the engine mount would go if there was an engine mount right here. So all I gotta do now is just spline it through there and be careful not to roll the seal. So the first time I did this, it went pretty smooth. I'm hoping it goes as smooth this time. I felt some movement. Oh, did you see that? You see how much it just dropped in? That is the sweet spot. It is in the spline, so all we gotta do now is bolt this up, and we're gonna be in business. So this may be the first time I've been able to physically demonstrate how these axles work going through this oil pan. I've had a few questions, and I get it. It's not the easiest thing to comprehend because it's anything but normal. So this is the axle coming out. This is what spins the wheel, right? Pretty simple stuff. We know it's gonna go to a tire and wheel, which is on suspension, so it's gonna move. Obviously, we can't run a fixed axle in between there. That's why we have these custom little stubs here. Now let me show you what makes these special. So I'm nowhere near ready for these, but I'm gonna stick this one on here just to demonstrate how it works. So this thing has a pair of U-joints, and then the special part, the trick, is it's telescopic. So as your suspension's going up and down, this can move as needed, and it can go in and out if there's any kind of, you know, in and out movement needed. So that's what keeps it from ripping the engine apart. I mean, I'm not expecting a whole lot of rear end travel, but it looks like it's got about as much as any other car on the road would. Now that we got a lot of those tricky bits out of the way, it's time to start accessorizing this engine. You guys may remember Pristine, the Corvette. We ended up parting that car out, but I did keep a lot of parts. In fact, the accessory drive on Ethel is all going to be Corvette based. You put all that together and you've got a rather compact, budget-friendly serpentine belt system, although I do have my reservations about this alternator bracket. Moving on from those accessories, I decided to tackle something a little more exhausting. I put the header on. Not so much a final fitment, but I want to see clearance between dipsticks and other things on the engine. As you can see right here, I've already got a problem with the dipstick for the oil. Fortunately for me though, I've got this tool that I think we're going to be able to use to fix it. It took a little more effort than I anticipated, but ultimately I was able to bend that tube around that header. It looks alright, it'll definitely get the job done. So the other side of the engine has the transmission dipstick, which is a lot larger diameter tube. Well, that doesn't fit in my tool, so what I ended up doing is just massaging it a little over out of my way. So I'm at that point where if I install any more parts, it's really going to be counterproductive because they're going to have to come off to safely install this engine in the car. But there is one part that's been sitting around the past few months that I really want to play with, and that's my Holley Sniper Efi. This thing is sick. I cannot wait to see how well it works. It's EFI, self-tuning, and E85 compatible, which is important when you got a car named Ethel It needs to run with a little bit of ethanol. So I know this wasn't the most exciting video ever, but I really wanted to make it a point to showcase what this guy did when he built this car. The guy was incredible. This isn't the only car he built this way either, so there's more stuff out there. I just don't know where it is. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's still with us, but I'll tell you, I'd like to shake his hand because he is one cool dude. But guys, I'm going to end this video off right there. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.